This is Oreo. She's new to the house. She's a little confused by what I'm doing, so she's gonna hang out with me for this one. Welcome to Critical Role Demystified. I'm Mike Christensen, and this is the series where we break down the lessons we can learn as DMs and as players from episodes of Critical Role. Today we're tackling episode 26 of the Vox Machina campaign, Consequences and Cows. Unfortunately, Taliesin is not in this episode. He had caught a case of con crud at a convention. Obviously, since we just started a fairly Percy-centric arc, that makes this episode a little bit complicated, but Matt found a pretty elegant solution. The session opens with the party discovering that Lilith had left during the night. She's going to go to Vasselheim to see if Zara can help her figure out how to get rid of the threat of her evil sisters. Percy, meanwhile, has already gone down to the workshop where he is furiously tinkering and deep in his thoughts. It's a great way to write Percy out for the episode, especially because he seems sort of sleep-deprived, so maybe he's going to remember the other player characters came and checked on him, or maybe he won't. It depends if Taliesin watches the episode or not. Tiberius tries to teach Lockheed another trick. Again, he rolls before asking Matt. I've talked about this before, but I actually realized there's another reason that you should always ask first and then see if the DM wants you to roll, one that I didn't mention last time. It's not just good table etiquette, but it actually gives the Dungeon Master a chance to set a DC for what you're trying to do without being influenced by knowing what you rolled. In this case, Tiberius rolled kind of low, so Matt said that it seems like he's trying too hard to train Lockheed without treating him with kindness. So throughout the episode, we get little moments of Tiberius feeding Lockheed, trying to make it clear that he cares for him as a pet. As the rest of the party starts to have a serious conversation about the battles the night before, Tiberius goes down to his laboratory. Much like the last time this happened, when he went to go get the sigils of teleportation while Percy was discussing the Briarwood backstory, he's making sure his character is always actively working on something. And as we'll see later, what he's doing is important. It does need to get done at some point, and we'll come back to that. But because these things need to get resolved one at a time in the real world, after all, the DM can only handle one scene at a time, so you're not actually saving any significant time, well, there's no actual benefit to going off on your own to try to get things done faster, which I imagine is his intent with both of those examples. Again, now I understand the impulse here, and I'm not saying that splitting the party is always bad or dumb. But for this style of gameplay, being able to sit down and talk about the consequences of the previous game and the toll they're taking on the player characters' souls, well, the idea of going off and knocking out another errand so you're theoretically wasting less time during the in-game day just doesn't jive with that style. It also assumes that these long scenes are taking a long time when they're not. There's no meaningful difference if he had waited 30 minutes in the world of the game to go and run his errand. And it does ultimately send the message that these important conversations aren't important to him, and are literally considered a waste of time. Again, context matters, and I'm certainly not claiming that Tiberius is the only character in the past 8 years of Critical Role who's done this. That would be nonsense. But the fact that he keeps doing it does, as I've said before, indicate different priorities from the other 7 people at the table. Anyway, while Tiberius goes to his laboratory, Keyleth discusses how she was unsettled by Percy declaring to the broker, "Your soul is forfeit," right as he killed him. The others assumed it was just trash talk, but Keyleth seems worried that there's more to that line that Percy isn't telling them. Now you can make an argument, a very reasonable argument, that this is also influenced by an element of metagaming. After all, the characters have had backstory videos that played as part of the livestream for a long time. And in Percy's backstory video, we learned about a dream where a roaring cloud of smoke offered him vengeance, and that this was the inspiration for the gun. Keyleth wouldn't know about that, but Marisha does. However, I don't think this is something Matt or the cast has an issue with because it's something that Taliesin was arguably hinting at in some fashion by saying, "Your soul is forfeit." That's a very specific phrase, and while Grog's conclusion that Percy just meant, "I'm killing you," is totally valid, it's also valid for this to be the inciting incident for the cast to begin to figure this out. Now, I'm going to be super clear, this is something that's hard to get right, and there are some players I've played with who specifically overanalyze everything another character says if they, as a player, even have an inkling that the other player is keeping a secret. For some players, that's part of the fun, the fantasy of being able to unravel mysteries. And I think this scene doesn't break that level of metagaming specifically because this is based on something that Taliesin said. But also, is that just based on my perspective from the future of knowing that this Briarwood arc is going to be really good? If this moment bothers you, you're not wrong for that. It might just be a different style of play, but even if this does line up with your style, it can still be hard to get this technique right. Anyway, I'm planning a whole other video about this subject, so we're going to have to dig into it more when we get to that video. Jumping back to this scene, the party also acknowledges that even if there wasn't any additional meaning to that line, even if the broker's soul wasn't literally forfeit, as they all seem to be kind of dancing around that idea, the fact that it was leveraged at a random mercenary, not the Briarwoods or their ilk, and that the kill was so brutal is worrisome to the rest of the group. They decide that they do need to keep an eye on Percy. Keyleth also expresses concern for the brutality at which Tiberius killed that old woman, who was running away and then was actively asleep when she was killed. Now, Vax still thinks the kill was justified. Vex admits she shot the woman too. Tiberius's hands are not the only ones that are dirty, but the party acknowledges maybe it's not this specific example that's the issue. It's the overall brutality of their recent behavior. That's what's getting to Keyleth. Vax in particular acknowledges they don't want to be corrupted by the behavior they're trying to stamp out. Keyleth's bringing up a good point. Most of them don't actually have a lot of moral compunction about killing this specific old woman, although maybe the brutality of the exact kill was a lot, specifically because she was asleep. But the group resolves to take this as feedback going forward for their future fights. We cut to Tiberius in his laboratory, and we learn that Orion had essentially used the backstories of both the noble and the sage from the player's handbook for Tiberius, since both of those backstories apply to his character. So for gameplay purposes, he leans on the flavor of the noble, but only takes the background perks of the sage. That background trait is called Researcher, and it gives you the ability to track down information on things as needed. First of all, in theory, there's no problem with this, especially when you're converting characters from another system and you don't have an exact match for your character's traits. And even in general, you should be able to make up your own background. That's fine. But, counterpoint, you should consult your DM when you're doing this, rather than springing it on them when you're trying to use the feature. That would especially be useful for a feature like the Sage's Researcher ability, because in the next session, Orion is going to run into a bit of friction about how and when he can research something. And if he'd had this conversation earlier with Matt, it would have served him a lot better. But the greater issue is, I think, the fact that the noble background has the trait Position of Privilege, which is extremely useful. The rule reads, "Thanks to your noble birth, people are inclined to think the best of you. You are welcome in high society, and people assume you have the right to be wherever you are. The common folk make every effort to accommodate you and avoid your displeasure, and other people of high birth treat you as a member of the same social sphere. You can secure an audience with a local noble if you need to." This is the trait he said he wasn't taking in favor of being a researcher. But if you're Tiberius, and you keep throwing your family name around to win people's trust, you're kind of using this trait. This is especially the kind of feature that a GM like Matt will reward a lot, because it fits his style of game really well. And so you can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't benefit from the RP of the noble background and the feature from the sage, and expect the RP from the noble background to functionally give you the benefits of the Position of Privilege trait. It's just an unrealistic expectation. And it's why this kind of thing really needs to be discussed with the DM before you go down this road, so both of you know what is expected of you. And ideally, this is not the kind of thing that you bring up after 25 sessions in the new system, and only when you need to use that feature to get information on a monster, when you've essentially been gaining the unspoken benefit of the noble background for months. Matt didn't know Tiberius was blending these backgrounds until now. Now, that isn't to say that Tiberius' position as a member of Vox Machina isn't valuable as well. It is. And had he only been leveraging his status as a hero of the region to try to get special treatment, that would be a different circumstance. Hell, they've all been doing that. But as I've said, we've seen him invoke his father's name as proof of his trustworthiness. It's part of how he got the teleportation sigil back in episode 24. So for him to now claim he's using the background perk of the sage instead of the noble is, just a little bit cheap. Anyway, in this specific case, Tiberius is researching vampirism. This is an in-game way for the group to learn the details about a vampire's strengths and weaknesses in D&D. Holy symbols don't harm them, sunlight and running water do. A stake through the heart locks them in place in their coffin. If they're killed any other way, they return to mist and return to their coffin. Matt points out that this information is now at Orion's disposal, so yes, they did talk about metagaming after the last episode, and Tiberius doing research was the solution to get that information. But again, I would argue that he didn't need to claim a background trait to get this information. They could have just gone to consult Allura or Gilmore for these details. He just wanted to be able to solve the situation as quickly and painlessly as possible, which is appealing to be sure, but when he was already functionally using the noble trait for several sessions, it's just a bit cheap to double dip this way. Now, again, I'm not saying this just to dunk on a guy for playing D&D in a way that I wouldn't, or in a way that I wouldn't want a player at my table to play. There are some of you watching who might have never considered that something like this could be considered disruptive behavior. Hopefully, seeing it laid out this way without demonizing Orion for doing this can help give you a sense of why this sort of thing might lead to some friction at the table, even if your ultimate goal is to benefit the party. And there are some of you who don't think this kind of thing matters at all, and that's totally fine. There are different kinds of metagaming and different kinds of min-maxing, and not all of them bother everybody equally. Half the comments I get on these videos say things like, well, Marisha and Taliesin metagame just as much as Orion. I mean, citation needed, but sure, let's say that's true. It's just usually a different type of metagaming. Keyleth saying that they should keep an eye on Percy because the line, your soul is forfeit, might indicate some weird supernatural stuff is happening, is arguably a form of metagaming. But it's not the same as preparing to use water to do damage to a vampire when the character doesn't even know that there's a vampire in the room yet. It's just not the same thing. The stuff that bothers some of you about other cast members metagaming, even the stuff that bothers me as they've continued to do some of it for years and years and years, clearly doesn't bother Matt. That's why all this always comes down to finding an equilibrium with your GM and your other players, and making sure you're all on the same page. But hopefully now you have a sense of why this sort of behavior might be disruptive, and more specifically, how to go about avoiding it. Talk to your GM in advance. When Tiberius comes upstairs, the rest of the group does ask him to maybe not be quite so brutal in the next fight. The conversation gets a little bit tense because A, Tiberius doesn't quite seem to get the frustration, B, Keyleth keeps pointing out that the old woman didn't do anything and was actively retreating, but C, to show an example of how things can happen in the heat of battle, Vax brings up the fact that Keyleth once killed a kid. But obviously, that's not the same. Regardless of how you feel about the murder of the old woman, Keyleth didn't deliberately kill that kid. It was an accident that still haunts her to this day. Meanwhile, Tiberius shows no remorse for killing the old woman, and seems a bit confused why he should. Again, the issue isn't just that he killed her, but the brutality through which it was done. And in my last episode, I talked about the fact that I think that fight was as brutal as it was because the cast was venting their frustrations about the Briarwoods getting away. Tiberius certainly was not the only one, and Keyleth acknowledges in this episode that it was a rough night for everyone. Plus, look, the broker was coming after Lilith, who is just delightful, so really, who could blame them for wanting to protect her? Anyway, at this point, once Vax brought up the death of the child, the conversation has ceased being productive in any way. This is something they're going to have to revisit. So, it's time for them to go and talk to Sovereign Uriel. They travel to the palace and they enter the throne room for the first time since they saved Uriel and his family from demonic possession in a pre-stream game. The same fight where Pike was killed and had to be resurrected, at the same temple they went to last night. Matt is deliberately giving them a lot of reminders of that brutal encounter over these past few sessions. I don't think there's a message Matt is sending other than just making sure that the cast remembers that they technically haven't been to some of these locations since that event, and to remind them that the death of Pike would still be weighing on them heavily. It's just a nice touch. It's a nice detail to include to make sure the impact is staying fresh in your players' minds. Vox Machina is not alone with Uriel. The Council of Tal'dorei is here, as are more than 24 guards. And here, Uriel starts to lay out some of the trouble, because it sure looks like Vox Machina were the instigators last night.
Now, I've since been notified, and seen a bit of the aftermath, that you, Vox Machina, seemingly attacked our guests shortly. Please, listen. Attacked our guests shortly after the meal, in their own guest quarters, forcing them to flee after you destroyed the hallway, ruined their carriage, murdered 2 of their guards, 2 more outside, and leaving Seeker Assume to witness this entire process. Assume kind of gives a nod. You then tortured the carriage driver, requested he be sent to the dungeon beneath your keep, and upon my sentries returning from Greyskull to deliver him, they find a freshly murdered old woman not far behind the path you took. Not long after, Seeker Assume found me and corroborated most of this unexpected violent behavior. I then asked Arbiter Brom here to divine the nature of this murder, and through his divine sight through the goddess Ioun, comes to tell me it was none other than you, Tiberius, that slaughtered this elderly woman while she slept.
Yeah, this all looks really, really bad. One of the council members, Arbiter Brom, casts a spell, and the party members make charisma saving throws. Some of them roll great, some of them not so great, but Matt doesn't declare what the effect is, and we'll come back to that later. They also deduce with an insight check that Assume is not his normal self, In fact, he's perhaps still under the influence of the mind control effect from the night before. The party lays out what they know. The Briarwoods are vampires, they bit Vax, they killed Percy's family, not last night, but in the past, and Vox Machina was trying to protect Uriel. Vax also keeps asking for a mage to look into his memories. He admits he doesn't know anything about magic, but surely someone has the ability to see if he's telling the truth. I also want to highlight this moment. Vax is trying to explain that they don't have to take Vox Machina's word for anything. They should be able to use magic to figure out what happened. But Tiberius starts to interject. Their word should be enough. Now, Vax did try a similar tactic earlier in the conversation, but then pivoted to a more useful argument, reminding Uriel that he could call in mages to figure out the truth. Magic exists. But Tiberius also insists that the word of a Stormwind should be enough to give them the clout they need to navigate the situation. But here's the problem with that. He just gave up that ability. Literally, earlier in this episode, he told Matt he was not going to take the noble feature that gives him a position of privilege in situations like this, which means he can't also use his name to try to get special treatment in Uriel's palace. It's not out of character for Tiberius to throw his family name around, and doing so in the palace in this specific context is especially brazen, but even setting that aside, what he's trying to do is literally use his name to gain favor with another noble. But less than an hour ago, he specifically said he isn't taking that perk. And you really can't have it both ways.
Silence. You're in my court now, Stormwind. You put so much weight upon this trust, and you have done a good service. But also I've heard whispers that you've thrown this trust around in many circles. Remember, we held a parade in your honor. We spread the word of the good deeds you've done. We, at our own costs of Amon, built you a keep, a home, at great expense, to show thanks. And also, I believed, upon allowing you to join this council, put us square. I owe you nothing. Just as you owe me nothing.
Uriel is right. Vox Machina throws his name around whenever it suits them. And not without good reason. Obviously, they did save his life and the lives of his family. But also, none of that means they shouldn't, for example, still be required to fill out the proper paperwork when teleporting into the city. The fact is, this was inevitable. There was always going to be a moment when Vox Machina's entitlement caught up with them. The fact that it did so under these intense circumstances is just especially unfortunate. Uriel points out that Alora would normally perform the sort of spell Vax is requesting, but she's too close to Vox Machina, so they're going to assign someone else to do so. It'll take a few days to find someone who is qualified. I suspect Matt doesn't want to imply that this kind of spell is particularly commonplace, but he also potentially needs to look into what spell would suit the situation. Hell, I've been playing 5th edition D&D for almost 9 years. I can't think of the spell off the top of my head that gives you access to someone's memories. So I'm sure Matt, with less than 30 sessions in 5e under his belt, probably didn't want to commit to a spell in this moment either. Now the party pivots to the subject of Seeker Assume, saying his mind might not be his own, and Keyleth can actually help. She can try to restore his mind. Uriel doesn't see the need since Assume is acting normally, but in recognition of the relationship they've built thus far, he does allow Keyleth to perform the spell. She casts Greater Restoration, and Assume gives her a very subtle gesture to play along, and then he tells Uriel that the spell had no effect, his feelings haven't changed. So for the time being, while they're under investigation, Uriel revokes Vox Machina's membership in the Council of Tal'dorei. They can leave the city, but if it looks like they're fleeing, Uriel will send people to find them. And he's not above putting bounties on their heads. While they're leaving the palace, Vax asks if the guards have seen his serpent belt from the night before, but, he's not exactly someone they're super interested in helping out right now. Alora catches up with them outside the palace, and she basically asks Tiberius, "Say it ain't so. Tell me you didn't kill an old woman who was retreating and asleep." Tiberius, and Vax, it should be said, both feel that the kill was entirely justified, but the rest of the group is starting to realize that maybe the kill was, not such a good idea. Sure, tactically, in a fight, you should probably finish off the people who are trying to kill you. And if this had been a fight with some cultists in a dungeon, no one would have cared. But when you're in civilization, there are laws. And Vox Machina's feelings that they can literally get away with murder had to be challenged. Their actions have consequences. And the fact that they didn't think further ahead than just the fight with the Briarwoods and the fight with the broker, and the fact that they barely considered how this would all look, the fact that they were almost sadistic when they took down the broker and his crew, well, you can't just do whatever you want and assume there won't be any consequences. Alora doesn't even linger on the subject of the old woman. We've talked about it longer than she does. although she does regard Tiberius with a look of disappointment and heartbreak. We also learned that Arbiter Brahm did cast Zone of Truth when they were in the throne room, and most of the cast made the save. So it doesn't matter that they were telling the truth, because Brahm couldn't confirm it. They had resisted his spell. Now, these days, Matt probably would have made it clear to the players who failed to save, either out loud or with a whisper, and told them that they couldn't tell a lie. But in this particular episode, he was already dealing with a metagaming problem at the table, so my guess, I don't know this for sure, but my guess is that he didn't want anyone to acknowledge something they couldn't know and talk about the Zone of Truth spell during the scene. Allura basically gives Vox Machina a green light to go and get some evidence. If they can find something that belongs to the Briarwoods, that would give the mages a lot more to work with to divine the truth. Tiberius goes to run some more errands, more on that later, and the rest of the cast goes to interrogate the prisoner in their keep. When they arrive, there are two people waiting outside of their keep, a pair of farmers representing all of Amon's farmers who are all dealing with a shared issue. Some sort of giant bird is stealing their livestock. The farmers have all scrounged together a payment, meager though it might be.
Now, we've talked with the leaders of the farming community this side of Amon, and well, we've scrounged up what we could, and he brings up a couple of verses, and she goes, 512 gold pieces, 37 silver, and 103 copper. That's all we can spare.
Matt is being extremely clever here. He knows this is going to make the farmers seem a bit pitiful, or, to be more accurate, pitiable. Not only does this give them something to do in this session while they're waiting for Taliesin to get back and resume the Briarwood story, but it also gives them a chance to consider how they want their reputations to be perceived, and perhaps strive to be better people than they were last night.
You know what?
Would you esteemed heroes...
Keep your money.
Yes, keep your money.
We can't possibly,
What about this? What if you supplied us with a small stream of produce for our servants here at the keep? For cooking, for feeding them, for feeding us when we're here? That'd be a sight less than 500. It wouldn't be nothing. You would still give us something.
And it turns out, yeah, Vox Machina does want to be better people. They might not all sincerely feel the need to change right at this moment, but at the very least, they know they need to rehabilitate their reputation. Plus, these sweet old folks just need some help. We cut to Tiberius briefly. He cashes in the favor from Gilmore at the Alabaster Lyceum to gain access to the teleportation sigil in Westron. The reason why is because it's close to a portal to the Feywild, which is where one of the artifacts he's questing after is located. Tiberius also mentioned earlier in the episode that he had another errand he wanted to do as well, to reinforce a crossbow, which he acknowledged he didn't actually know what that meant, and that he also wanted to start enchanting his blades when he got back to the keep. Now, he doesn't remember to do those two things in this session, but we'll talk more about Tiberius's errands in the next episode. Most of the rest of the party, minus Vax, who is sulking on the walls of the keep, but everyone else goes to visit the coachman in the cell. They discover he was chained up by manacles to the ceiling, which the party did not realize would happen when the guards imprisoned him, so they unlock him immediately.
Where am I?
You are being held at the moment for your own safety.
My own safety?
Yeah.
How? He kind of looks at his hand.
Well, you were captured, and we're pretty sure the Briarwoods are going to be pissed as hell that you let the carriage get hit. So we're just trying to protect you, really.
Really?
Well, sort of. I mean, his friends all died, so he didn't.
Technically.
Do we not feel like terrible people enough
Let's
already
not have this
today?
conversation in front of the prisoner. What's your
I'm
name,
just
boy?
pointing it out.
My name is Desmond. Desmond Altham. I am the son of a messenger, a courier of the Dorolo family.
He's the son of a messenger. That's like even more ironic.
Do you need to step outside?
No, I'm good. Continue. Son of a messenger.
I know one reason that some fans of Critical Role don't like Keyleth is because they perceive her as being self-righteous, and we'll have to dig into that some other time because that is a really loaded sentiment that can come from well-meaning places or be a form of bad faith criticism, and it's not always too easy to tell the difference. But for this example, I really, really want to highlight that, yes, she is trying to make a case for a certain morality here, but she's also making an extremely salient point. Vex is trying well, let's acknowledge this is a legitimate interrogation tactic, and let's not interrogate the subtext of that statement today, but she's basically trying to win Desmond over by making it seem like the Briarwoods don't have his back. And, that's not a terrible tactic. In fact, Desmond essentially validates it a moment later by saying, nobody's supposed to get away from the Briarwoods, and that he really is in danger. But Vex's method is to point out that Desmond failed the Briarwoods, and try to claim that they're the good guys who are just looking out for his best interests. But considering everything they've put Desmond through, Keyleth is asking a very reasonable question. Should we be doing this to this guy? Should we be threatening him with death by Briarwoods, making it seem like it was somehow his fault that the carriage got hit by their spell? Should they try to convince this dude that they're the good guys, even though one of their own teammates shot off Desmond's hand? Everyone talks about how the Briarwood arc is excellent for Percy's character, which it absolutely is, but it's also where some of my favorite Keyleth moments come in. Because right now, the party is at a tipping point. They're starting to get very comfortable doing bad things, or even taking morality out of the question, doing cruel things that they don't have to do. And this is something we've talked about a few times on my channel. Giving players the freedom in an RPG to do whatever they want sometimes means they'll do things they don't need to do, things that are cruel, just because it doesn't occur to them not to, or because the greater good in their minds is more important, or just because the people they're doing these things to aren't real, and there's no real-world impact. But I think every group benefits from having a Keyleth, someone who can ask the really reasonable question. Are we the baddies? In a lot of ways, that is her role in the Vox Machina campaign, and some of my favorite examples come in the Briarwood arc, and this is one of them. As she says, they literally shot the messenger, well, the son of the messenger, which is the go-to example for taking out your anger on the one person who did not deserve it. And I really appreciate her calling it out, because I think it helps to begin the process of reorienting Vox Machina toward some more reasonable behavior. Anyway, Desmond lays out what happened in Whitestone. It's a long sequence, so I'm going to abridge it. He can't confirm that the Briarwoods are vampires, he doesn't know that for sure, but he knows he's seen Lady Briarwood out in the sunlight before. After the Briarwoods took over Whitestone, they executed any dissidents who rose up. Those who fled town were soon found hanging from the sun tree in the center of town. Local nobles were slain, and the Briarwoods mercenaries were installed as the new nobles. These nobles would torment the villagers for fun. Desmond was a coachman for these nobles, and at one point, he was beaten badly by Count Tal'dorei. Lord Briarwood found out, hung Tal'dorei from the sun tree, and made Desmond the coachman for the Briarwoods instead. That was nice of him. And that's when Desmond found out that the Briarwoods were far, far worse than the new nobles. Whitestone Castle is a house of horrors. Green fog drifts from the castle grounds. Undead servants roam the halls. They're excavating something in the dungeon, bringing up ancient relics and bones. And now Desmond is a loose end. Oreo, I was trying to deliver some dramatic information. You kind of undercut some of that. It's alright, it's fine. The party wants Desmond to testify to Uriel. Maybe they can actually raise an army to fight the Briarwoods. They insist, now far more earnestly, that they can keep Desmond safe from the Briarwoods and help liberate Whitestone. He'll have to think about testifying, but in the meantime, they bring him an actual bed to sleep on. They recruit Jarrett, one of their guards who they like a lot and who is a badass, to keep watch outside of Desmond's cell. Meanwhile, Tiberius goes to see Allura in her tower, but he can't, because all the members of Vox Machina have had their access to the entire Cloudtop district revoked. He flies back to the keep, and Vax offers him some alcohol, which he takes and gets drunk very fast. He laments that nobody likes them anymore because he, quote, killed that bitch that tried to kill us, which is an accurate description, but also maybe indicates the actual problem with killing the old woman. The fact that Tiberius apparently learned nothing from the experience, and still feels that Vox Machina deserves to be treated a certain way, regardless of their behavior. This is why, in the Critical Role discourse, the blame for the old woman's death is always placed at Tiberius's feet, because he seems completely unwilling to learn from it, or to accept the consequences of it. The party immediately asks Keyleth to fix drunk Tiberius, and she's really annoyed. She's already trying to figure out how to fortify the keep and protect Desmond. Tiberius also hugs Keyleth a few times, which she's also annoyed and frustrated by, and asks him to stop. Here's a lesson. If someone says, stop touching me, don't keep touching them. Okay, fine, Oreo, I'll put you down. Anyway, that's just good life advice, clearly. Also, at one point during this drunk Tiberius scene, Tiberius asks if someone wants him to cast Fireball, apropos of nothing. Because, he's famous for his fireball, so he might as well say the thing. He also carries on about how they need to talk to Allura, because she can fix everything, despite the fact that they already talked to her, like, an hour ago, and she specifically said she could not fix this right now. Anyway, this scene is not the end of the world. Some people thought it was funny, others thought it was frustrating. Some of those perceptions are colored by Tiberius's and Orion's later behavior. I'm not going to dwell on it, this video is long enough, but seriously, if someone says stop touching me, just stop touching them. They give Tiberius the afternoon to sober up, and then they head off to the farms to try to catch this bird.
Here's my plan.
Okay.
We're all cows. Is that an okay plan?
I like it.
I'm kind of into this plan.
All right, I
But
guess.
doesn't that essentially make us the bait?
Yes, we're our own bait.
They set themselves as bait, Keyleth in particular making sure she's slightly apart from the others so she's more vulnerable and available to be grabbed. And then the bird appears, a huge bird with a 100-foot wingspan. It swoops up Keyleth and flies off, moving just bonkers fast. Thankfully, Dimension Door's range is 500 feet, so Scanlan appears on top of the giant bird. Tiberius casts Fly on the rest of the party, and, still looking like cows, they all fly after the bird.
All of you guys, at that point, you see Tiberius, and you all take off
I
after.
hope we don't get in trouble for fleeing him all.
The cows take off into the night sky.
Fly, Vox Machina, moo!
Vox Moochina.
A squadron
Of weirdly sized flying cows lit by moonlight chasing after
It's
a giant
the
bird.
Emblem logo, except we're cows.
I love Dungeons and Dragons.
Normally that's the kind of goofy bonus clip I'd say for the Patreon-only version of this episode, but come on, it's one of the most iconic Critical Role clips ever. I couldn't leave it out. Keyleth casts Polymorph on the bird, and then the bird becomes a cow and falls out of the sky. Keyleth becomes an eagle, Scanlan becomes a pterodactyl, but they still look like cows. The bird-turned cow hits the ground and makes a huge impact. And then the bird emerges from the crater and keeps flying away. That thing has a lot of hit points. They follow the bird into the mountain range and find its nest. They start to realize it might be a mama bird, and they don't feel all that great about killing it. Maybe they can relocate it. It'll be a challenge, for sure. And then a voice calls out to them from the nest. Someone is protecting this bird. Someone small who is also casting spells to cure the bird's wounds. A gnome druid known as Byron, who has eschewed civilization in favor of protecting wild and beautiful creatures like this one. They begin to have a genuine philosophical debate. Who determines whose lives are worth sacrificing to feed others? What's the difference between this bird killing livestock to survive and the people of civilization killing livestock to survive? If Byron and the bird aren't part of civilization, why do they care if it's a crime to steal the livestock? Keyleth approaches the bird and Matt calls for an animal handling check. After she rolls well enough to get close, she produces good berries to feed to the bird, and allows the bird to basically break her hand eating them. It literally deals more damage than it did when it scooped her up earlier with its talons. Byron says this creature is a rock. A young rock. It's not a mother, it's a child. Which means it's not as powerful mechanically as it would be as an adult, which is a nice way for Matt to either monkey with this creature's stats and make it weak enough for his party, or, inversely, and honestly far more likely, this leaves the door open for him to monkey with the stats for the next rock they might fight, in order to make it more of a challenge. Keyleth tries to play good cop and point out, that they've already found the rock. How long does he expect it will be until the next group of mercenaries shows up? How long will Byron be able to protect this bird? And when considering other alternatives, Vax suggests Whitestone. Tiberius makes a deception check to try to sell this idea. I'm calling this out because this is the second check they've rolled to try to earn Byron's trust. I'm going to do a thing in a minute. But then, Keyleth jumps in because, well, like I said earlier, that's not necessarily a good idea. Logically, or morally.
Whitestone.
No.
This Whitestone.
Wait, no, hang on. No. This is getting out of control already. I will not let you all do this. No, not today. You guys have caused enough problems. We are not going to push this creature off on other people. I'm trying, all right? I'm working on it.
With the other.
I don't want to push this problem off on a town that's already being held hostage by vampires. That fucking sucks. That's double shitting on them.
Vex suggests Vasselheim. There are plenty of big monsters in the forest that the creature could feed on and no one would care. She rolls a persuasion check and rolls really well, but Matt rolls a natural 20 when setting the DC for Byron to be convinced. But they really do try to convince him that Vasselheim might be best. And Keyleth says they could put in a good word with the Slayer's take to make sure they don't take a contract out ever on this rock. Mentioning that Vasselheim has a guild of monster hunters maybe isn't the brightest move, but Keyleth is really trying to be as honest as possible here. Scanlan says Byron really ought to take this deal before violence breaks out because they are trying to help, and he's asked to roll a persuasion check. And this is why I've been calling out all of these checks that they're making.
So this is your one and only warning. You must leave, and you must leave now. We're giving you a good choice, a safe choice, and we can help you get there and be safe there. But if you don't listen to us, we'll start killing.
Makes persuasion roll.
How many fucking persuasion rolls does this asshole need?
50. Persuasion?
This is essentially a conversational skill challenge. So every success and failure leads towards where the conversation's going to end.
32.
Realistically, because of the situation Matt has presented, one simple, single skill check can't solve this problem. It's inauthentic to the character of Byron to have him easily convinced, and, more importantly, convincing him with a single roll would be really unsatisfying and undramatic. That's the benefit of something like a skill challenge. However, I talked a bit about skill challenges in last week's video, about chases, but there's a downside to them as well. And it's the moment that we just saw, when the cast wonders how many times they're going to need to roll because they didn't know they were in a skill challenge. But of course, you don't always want to tell them in advance that they're entering a skill challenge, because you don't want the players to only try to use the tactics that they know they can roll well with due to their modifiers. You want them to approach the situation earnestly, not focused entirely on the list of skills on their character sheet. This isn't me specifically calling out these players for metagaming. This is a problem I've seen many, many times when I've presented a skill challenge to my own players across many different groups. If they know they're in a skill challenge, and especially when I tell them, try to be creative, feel free to pitch me things that you think might work, it's extremely tempting for players to look at their character sheet and pick their highest skills, and try to work backwards to figure out a way to make that skill work for the situation. Now, that's not always a bad way to play, but when you're trying to highlight the realism of a scene and trying to encourage your players to live in the reality of the game and not solely interact with the world through their character sheets, then that's not always the right approach. I don't know if there's a better solution to this problem than the one that Matt landed on, to just tell your players, once they're frustrated or confused, that they are making progress, and that their successes and failures are being weighed. At the very least, I think it was the right approach for this group in this session. Going forward, I'm pretty sure that there are lots of scenes like this in future episodes of Critical Role. Arguably, this is what happened when Kima met Clarota, and the cast had to negotiate a truce between the two of them. And in the future, the cast will understand, in tense scenes, that a single roll can't make up an NPC's mind. It might take a few different tactics and a few different rolls. And unlike normal skill challenges, Matt might not have a specific number of successes to failures in his head for this kind of situation. I generally think because his players are actors and storytellers, he can trust them to actually sell him on the best ideas, and use their rolls just to determine how persuasive, for example, Byron finds these attempts. But that's purely speculation on my part. Is Matt waiting for them to have answers to all of Byron's counterarguments to the point where he really feels like Byron has been convinced? Or is he waiting for them to collect 3 or 4 successes before they get 3 or 4 failures? I don't know that answer for sure, and neither answer would surprise me. Because for a group like this, neither answer is wrong. At your tables, it might be asking way, way too much to ask your players to genuinely make the argument their character could make with a successful persuasion check. Not all players are as good with their words as these literal voice actors who read scripts every day and have a really good idea of what natural, compelling dialogue sounds like. And I'm sure we'll talk about that question some other day, of how to resolve persuasion checks for players who can't make the arguments their characters would make. But I just think it's interesting that, yes, the cast was wondering how many rolls it would take to persuade Byron. But I don't know if telling them in advance that they were in a skill challenge would have been the answer. And I also don't think that not telling them when they ask would be the answer either. It seems like Matt had hit upon the best solution, at least for his players. Anyway, Scanlan rolled really well, and Byron is now ready to talk logistics for a trip to Vasselheim. It's across the sea, so Scanlan says they can get the farmers to give up 2 more cows, a parting gift in good faith, to sustain the rock on the trip. Tiberius magically sends a note to the Slayer's Take to let them know in advance of the bird's arrival. Vex buys the cows from the farmers, specifically saying they're trying to be nice these days. And as the rock takes the cows, that's the end of the episode.
I gave you my hand.
My hand!
Nope.
Battle maps that never get used.
Oh, look at us!
That's a
not
pretty
fighting
one,
things.
too.
That's really beautiful.
That's a great
It
map.
would have been really bad, too.
For
I'm
us?
glad we didn't fight.
Bad for us?
Well, just imagine a giant bird that grabs you and then drops you off the side of a mountain.
Oh,
Yeah, cool.
Would have been an interesting
missed
fight.
opportunity.
Would have been an interesting fight.
Thank you so much for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks for episode 27. For those of you who are watching these Vox Machina episodes along with us, don't watch episode 27. It's not a great episode. But we'll talk about it in 2 weeks. We'll have lots to say. In the meantime, I have more D&D videos every Monday and Thursday. My past 3 videos have all expanded on subjects touched on in my last Demystified video, and considering how long this video wound up being, I probably should have done the same thing this time. Ah well, too late now. And I've got 3 awesome videos coming out between now and the next Demystified episode, so I would love if you would subscribe to check out those videos. At the time of filming, we are really close to 3,000 subscribers, and I still owe you a live stream for hitting 25,000 subscribers, and I'm going to do a dice giveaway. And when you're watching this, I've scheduled that live stream. I'm going to go live on Wednesday, March 15th at 10 a.m. Pacific. Just a reminder, we did just change our clocks, so double check what that time is for you. I also have a Patreon, and this series will go weekly once we hit 1,000 patrons. We just crossed 300 patrons, which is so fantastic. Even if you're just able to support at $1 a month, it still means so much to me and makes a huge difference. But also, if you back at higher levels, you get other cool stuff too, like the extended version of this episode that has a few added video clips in it. If you can't support me financially, I totally understand. You can still join my Discord community and hang out with other people who watch these videos and share their opinions. They compare notes about Critical Role and give each other recommendations for actual play shows. It's such a great group of people. I also have a newsletter. I don't send out updates super awesome, but when I do, you can keep an eye out for those via my newsletter. I probably sent one out about when that live stream will be held, which I definitely know. It's going to be at... But I bet there was other cool stuff in that newsletter as well. I'm really proud of my last video, which dealt with the topic of torture in D&D. If you've enjoyed these past few Critical Role Demystified episodes, please check out that video as well. It's really terrific. Until next time, play fair and have fun.